And everybody found last week's videos?
Yes.
Okay, if you want to review. Okay, so today's topic is the English consonants, and we're going to be using the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA, to describe these consonants. So you will be learning some new symbols here, and this is a wonderful way of approaching the sounds that we use in order to produce our language, because the International Phonetic Alphabet, it can describe the sound system of every language of the world, not only of English. So we will be focusing on English consonants, of course, in this class, because that's English linguistics. But this system, you can see how it can be expanded to other languages as well. So any of the 6,000 or so languages of the world can be described by using the system that you will be learning today. And if you are interested in following up in your book, it's on page 57. In language files, and this will help you because I don't know how visible this is, but page 57, if you keep that open in language files, that'll be easier to follow that way. And we are going to go over every single English consonant sound today. And you notice when you look at the consonant chart and when we start putting those to the correct slots here on the board, you will notice that there are some that look very familiar to you because they have a corresponding grapheme, a letter that is identical. But there are several of these IPA symbols that will be new to you, and they describe English sounds as well. Okay? So what are the three things? We've kind of went over this already in one of the earlier PowerPoints that have been posted for the course. What are the three things that we need in order to describe any consonant of any language of the world? We need, yes?
Voicing?
Yes. Yes, and I'm going to put that here. These are just in no specific order. So sounds are either voiced or voiceless. So we need voicing to describe the consonant sounds. The vowel sounds in English, they are all voiced. There are languages that have some unvoiced consonants, but English does not. So you can always check whether a consonant sound is voiced or voiceless by just holding your fingers on your throat, on your Adam's apple, and or that place there. And you can feel if your vocal cords are vibrating or not, because the larynx, the voice box, is right here in the throat, and the larynx includes the vocal folds, so vocal cords. Books use both terms. And between the vocal cords, there is that glottis, which is the space between the vocal cords. So the vocal cords can either vibrate or not, and when the vocal cords vibrate, the sound is voiced. When the vocal cords do not vibrate, the sound is voiceless. So we could try this by taking a sound such as say, I want to hear everybody saying this, and hold your throats while you're doing it. So, do you feel vibration there? Nope. Then now say, zzz, zzz, zzz. Do you feel vibration now? Yes or no? Yes, good, okay. So that's the difference, that's the only difference. You don't change the position of your tongue, you don't change anything else in the vocal tract. You just make your vocal cords vibrate, and voila, you get a different sound. Now, this difference in English can be very significant from the point of view of the sound system of English. When we talk about sounds per se, sounds, the physical entities of sounds, the concrete sounds that we can hear, that we can put through a voice editing system, and we can see how they would look there. These are concrete. And when they are in brackets, when we talk about the sounds, the brackets indicate that we're talking about the sounds, the concrete sound. So the s or z, the concrete sound. Now you will sometimes see in your textbook, you will see that the symbols, the IPA symbols, are surrounded not by brackets, but they're surrounded by slashes, and that is a distinction. When we talk about concrete sounds, the phones, we put them in brackets. When we talk about the sounds as representatives of the abstract phoneme, we put them in slashes. So these indicate phones, which are concrete, and these indicate phonemes, which are more abstract. Often it doesn't make the representation doesn't really make a big difference for understanding, but it is a very important theoretical distinction between phones and phonemes, and we'll talk much more about that once we get to the next chapter, which is phonology. But at this point, I do want to point out already that the sounds in brackets s and z are not only sounds of English, but they also belong to two different phonemes. One is the phoneme s, and one is the phoneme z. And we know this because English has minimal pairs of words where you don't change anything else. You just change s to an z, and you get a different meaning of that word. So we have seal versus zeal. We already have this quick example, and we have sit, the verb, and zit, which we occasionally find on our faces. So those are two different words with two different meanings, and a phoneme is powerful in a language. That's why it's an important part of the phonological system of language, because it can change the meaning of the word if you change one phoneme to another. Okay, and we'll talk about phonemes more and allophones once we move forward. But voicing is one way of creating a different kind of sound. What are the other two things that we absolutely need in order to describe consonant sounds? We need voicing as one of the characteristics. Is the sound voiced or voiceless? What else do we need? Yes?
Place of articulation.
Exactly. And the last thing we need, the third thing, manner of articulation, yes. And we don't need anything else, it's kind of amazing, you know, that these are the only things we need in order to describe all the English consonants and all the consonants of all the languages of the world. In your textbook, in language files, if you go to the very end of the book, there is a chart of all the world's consonants. And you will notice, once you find it, you will notice that that chart has many, many more symbols than what we are going to be looking at. Ah, there it is. Okay. So, here. And it will have a lot more symbols than the English system. So here we have the English consonants, and here we have the IPA systems of the known languages of the world. So there are many, many more. If you look, for instance, at the fricative line, there's a fricative for every slot there. But if you now turn back to page 57, this page shows only the English consonant sound. So let's start looking over it. So here on the chart on the board, this is just replication of what you have on page 57. So you don't necessarily have to copy it unless you want to go through that exercise in order to better remember these sounds. But we'll talk about every single sound here. So here we have the places of articulation. Starting from the front of the mouth, we have the place which is called the bilabial place. Bilabial means two lips. So labial, lips, bilabial. And that is one place of articulation, right? Remember, lips are articulators. But lips can also be that place of articulation if the sound is produced by using the lips. Then we have the labiodental place of articulation, which means that we are involving the lip and the teeth as the place of articulation. So that you put your lower teeth against the upper lip, and that's the place of articulation there. We'll look at what sounds are produced in that place. Then we have interdental, which means what? Between the teeth. Inter, between, and dental teeth. So these look like a lot of new symbols or new labels. Yes, they are, but if you stop to think about what these mean, kind of like translate into plain English, it's going to be easier to remember. But you know, all disciplines, linguistics included, they have their own terminology, and today is a day when you will be learning a lot of that new terminology. And you know, you kind of gotta admit that it sounds fancier to talk about labial sounds than lip sounds, and dental sounds than tooth sounds, but that means the same thing. Okay, so moving back, and this is why we covered the vocal tract before we do the actual consonants, because you need to know the names for the places in the vocal tract. We have alveolar sounds, which are produced where the place of articulation is at or close to the alveolar ridge, which is that ridge, the little rickety place right behind the front teeth. If you try it with the tip of your tongue, you can feel that it's like these little stairs that are going behind your front teeth. And moving the tip of your tongue from the alveolar ridge further back, you get to the post-alveolar region, which is right behind the alveolar ridge. And in some linguistics textbooks, they skip the post-alveolar and they go directly to palatal, but you know, it's an approximation. Where does the alveolar ridge stop? Where does the palate begin? What is the post-alveolar region? But anyway, so this is right behind the alveolar ridge. Then we have, if you let your tongue go further back to that very highest point of the roof of your mouth, that's roof of your palate, that is called the palate, and the sounds produced in that place are palatal sounds. And we kind of went over this when we talked about the vocal tract. So palatal sounds are produced at the palate, and then going further back, we get to the soft palate. You can feel if you let your tongue slide back from the hard roof of the mouth, the palate, the high point of the palate, and then let it go further back, and the palate becomes, all of a sudden it becomes soft, right? So that's the velum, V-E-L-U-M, the anatomical name for that place in the mouth, and the sounds produced at the velum are velar sounds. Then going to the glottis, to the voice box, the larynx here in the throat, there are glottal sounds, a couple of glottal sounds in English, which are produced there at the glottis, which is the opening between the vocal cords. Okay, so those are the places of articulation, partially a review of what you've already studied. And then we have the manners of articulation. And this is the beauty of the whole system, that you can have a place of articulation and voicing that allows you to produce different kinds of sounds, but if you add a manner to that, it multiplies the possibilities of the different sounds that we can produce in our limited human laboratories of language, which is the vocal tract. So in the same place we can produce different kinds of sounds because the manner might be different. Okay, so we've got stops, fricatives, affricates, a flap, nasals, liquids, and glides, and we'll go over every sound from the point of view of these three criteria: manner and place and voicing. So let's start from bilabials and stops. So stops are called stops because you stop the airflow at some point of the vocal tract completely. And then you release that stop, you open that stop, and the air comes out. And while it comes out, the sound is produced. And let's talk about the two bilabial stops that English has. English has a p, and b, like in the words pill versus bill. Okay. B. Can you feel how you put your lips together? You close your lips in order to start producing that sound. If you start saying, like, for instance, pill, lips are closed, you release that closure and the sound comes out. Now, what's the difference between p and b? Let's try it out. B, b, b.
Use more of your throat with the
The latter one is voice. The vocal cords are vibrating. You can feel the vibration there in your larynx. Yes. So these are, English has two bilabial stops, p and b, and the difference is the voicing. So I'm going to mark these in binary terms like plus voice and minus voice. Where p is voiced and b is p is voiceless and b is voiced. Okay, so English has these two, And they are also phonemes in English because we have word pairs like I mentioned pill and bill, and we can have bit and bit and lap and lab. So here we have the p, the voiceless, and here the b in the same place in the word. Okay, and when we have a pair of two words like this, those are called minimal pairs. And the fact that English has these minimal pairs, you know, we could sit down and think about a dozen others very easily. But the fact that there are these minimal pairs, it means that that these sounds are not only sounds of English, they are also what they are, not only phones, but they are also, what's the term? Phonemes, because they have the power of distinguishing between meanings. Most of the symbols that we're putting on the chart, they will be phonemes, and I'll mention specifically if they are not. Okay, so let's move back in the oral cavity. From the bilabial region, we come to the labiodental region. Now, English does not have labiodental stops. We do not use the labiodental manner of place of articulation to completely stop the airflow, because it would be anatomically kind of difficult. So what we would need to do is, with the lower teeth, we would need to completely block the airflow between the lower teeth and upper lip. And you know, you can try doing it, and it would be quite difficult. Few of us have such a straight line of teeth that we could easily, you know, do it. So we do not have labiodental stops in English. We will have labiodental fricatives, but not stops. We don't have interdental stops either in English, and that's also because it would be difficult anatomically to try to put your tongue between the teeth and then block the airflow completely there between the teeth. That would be, you know, tough. You know, we would kind of have to try to spread the tongue very carefully to cover all the spaces to make a complete block there. And we don't have those sounds in English. However, we do have alveolar stops in English, and we have two alveolar stops, a voiceless and a voiced one. And this you find in words like till and dill, a simple example. And again, we're talking about phonemes because they have the power of changing one word to another. So we have t and we have d. And what is the only difference between those? It's not the place of articulation. The place is the alveolar ridge, and the manner is that of a stop. But what is the difference?
D is voiced and t is voiceless.
Yes, t is voiceless. Okay. Now English does not have post-alveolar stops either, and English doesn't have palatal stops, but there are languages, many African languages produce these palatal stops. They're called the clicks, for instance, and the palate is the place of articulation and the manner is the stop, but English doesn't use these clicks. However, English does use velar. It has two deep velar stops. So going here to the velar region, we have two stops there, and these appear in the beginning of words like kill and gill. Therefore, the sound k and the sound g are also phonemes because they have the power of distinguishing the meaning between words. Kill, kill. And you can think of other minimal pairs that would show that point. The difference here, again, I'm asking a repetitive question so that we'll see that there actually is some kind of a pattern here. What is the only difference between k as in kill and g as in gill? Right?
G has voice, K doesn't have voice.
Exactly. So for g, the vocal cords are vibrating. You can feel it. So this is minus voice, and this is plus voice. Okay. So you see that we have like a constellation of sounds. We've got 3 pairs of stops, p, b, t, d, k, g, produced in 3 different places of articulation using the same manner by stopping the airflow. And that kind of, shows that the sound system, it uses these limited resources, but we can produce different kinds of sounds, and these stops show that there is some kind of pattern there as well. There is one more stop, and that is not a phoneme in English. It's used to often replace a sound like t or d, and in the middle of the word. So in American English, specifically in these words, how do you pronounce those words?
Kitten and button.
Kitten, button. In a more relaxed situation, you might say kitten and button, right? So if you say kitten, oh, that's a cute kitten, kitten, kitten. There's like this little catch in the throat instead of the t. If you say kitten, kitten, that may sound a little bit either formal or foreign. Maybe British English, right? So kitten versus kitten, same meaning. The meaning doesn't change, but we often use what is called a glottal stop in these medial positions in the word. There are, for British dialects where the glottal stop is used quite widely, one of the famous dialects, Cockney dialect of London, EastEnders, if you've been watching ever, so you can find the glottal stop used quite often. And in American English, we use it for kitten and button, especially in relaxed, quick talk. It is symbolized, indicated by an IPA symbol, which is like a question mark without a dot at the bottom or bottom. So that's called the glottal stop. And it's a voiceless sound. Because we could not very well have the vocal cords vibrate at the same time as we use the vocal cords to block the airflow for the By the way, this is a sound that we very often hear when somebody says, "Are you going to do that?" There are 2 glottal stops in Okay, but it's not a phoneme in English. It's an allophone. We'll talk more about those. Any questions about the stops before we move on to the next manner of articulation? Okay, so stops are produced so that we make a full stop. We obstruct the airflow from the lungs through the vocal tract by placing an articulator so that it blocks the airflow completely somewhere. But p, t, d, k, g. So for k and g, it's probably not so easy to kind of conceptualize it, but if you try to say the word kill, start saying kill without releasing that stop. You can feel how the very back of your tongue touches the velum, and that's why k and g are velar stops. And then we have the glottal stop, placed so that the vocal cords touch each other and impede the air from going through. And when it's open, then we get the sound, okay? So those are stops. We completely stop the airflow. But in these same places, languages can also not completely stop the airflow, but to obstruct it, so that you leave a little bit of an opening. Let the articulator go close to the place of articulation, leave a little bit of an opening, so that there's a tiny space for the air to flow through for the production of this sound. And when the air goes through that little opening, it creates the friction caused by the air pushing through that tiny opening creates the friction sound, or friction creates the sound. So we do not have, in English, we do not have stops, bilabial, we have bilabial stops, but we do not have bilabial fricatives. We could very well have a bilabial fricative, and this would be a bilabial voiceless fricative. When we just blow air through the lips. We can make it vibrate, but we don't use those as speech sounds in English. So the place where place of articulation where we do use, where we do have fricatives is the labiodental place, labiodental region, so that the lower lip touches the lower teeth touch the upper lip. And we push air through, and we can produce two different kinds of sounds there, a voiced one and a voiceless one. So how does that sound? Try it out. Here's a minimal pair that shows both of those sounds, which are called fricatives because of the friction. So that's the good mnemonic. And for feel, we have the lower lip touching the upper teeth. The same thing for veal, and the difference is what? The only difference. Yes, try it out. You can feel the vocal cords vibrate. So we have which is minus voice, and v, which is plus voice, a voiced sound. And again, because we have minimal pairs like feel and veal, fat and bat, we have these sounds and phonemes in English, not only phones, not only sounds, but also significant members of the sound system. So they are both sounds and or phones and because they can create minimal pairs, changing one to another. Interestingly, if any of you is in my history of English class, we'll talk about during that class about the fact that did not used to be a phoneme in English. It just appeared in certain positions of the word, and then it was automatically voiceless. Like if it was in the beginning, it was voiceless. But because of the French loanword that kept pouring into English after the Norman conquest, we have added some voiced fricatives as phonemes into the phoneme inventory of English, but that's a different story. Now we're just going over what we have now, not about the history of it, but the history also is interesting. Okay, the interdental place of articulation has also two fricatives in English, and you can already guess that one is going to be voiced and one is going to be voiceless. These are indicated by the IPA symbols of theta is the name of the symbol, and an old runic symbol, which is, I'm going to write it here so you can see it better. It's called an F, and it's an old, from the runic alphabet that English was first written in, and this is taken from Greek. Theta. Probably familiar with this from all the fraternities and sororities. They use the Greek letters. So also, and IPA uses that one too. So we've got theta and F, and these two represent two different sounds that are not distinguished in the English writing system by different letters, and indeed they are both represented by the same two letters. Anyone, what are the two letters that represent these two sounds? GH. Yes. So we use TH to represent these these sounds. And if you look at the words, the one on top and the one at the bottom, are these the same or a different sound in English? Start saying thistle and place your fingers on your larynx here. Thistle, can you feel a vibration or not? Thistle. And now this. So isolate those two sounds. Which one is voiceless? This one or this one? Voiceless. Thistle or this one. Exactly, yes. And that is indicated. The voiceless fricative, interdental fricative, is indicated by the symbol theta, and the voiced, like in this, is indicated by the symbol F. So we've got minus voice and plus voice. And these are interdental fricatives. Only two in English, and over the history of the language, there has developed this kind of a distribution for these two interdental fricatives, that the voiceless one, the theta, like in thistle, it appears in the beginning of content words like nouns and verbs, and the the voiced one appears in the beginnings of words that are little grammatical words, function words like the, this, that, those, these, then. So then is actually an adverb, but anyway. So let's move further back in the vocal tract and see what kinds of fricatives we can create at the alveolar region. We've already talked about this, so we have words such as seal and zeal. So we have s and z. Also phonemes because they can differentiate between meanings. So are the interdental fricatives also. Theta and eth. There aren't many minimal pairs for the interdental fricatives that can show that these are actually phonemes in English, but they are, because we do have, like for instance, we have the minimal pair. The body part, thigh, and the archaic way of saying your, like thy, hallowed be thy name, like in Lord's Prayer. Thigh and thy. Thigh has the theta, and thy has the eth, the voiced one. Okay, so now to the alveolar ridge, where we can also create sounds so that we don't let the tip of the tongue touch the alveolar ridge, like for t and d here, t and d, the tongue actually touches, but the tongue goes closer, it approaches the alveolar ridge, but we leave a little place for the air to go through. So s and z are produced at the alveolar ridge without the tongue really touching the alveolar ridge, but leaving a tiny narrow opening for the sound to go through. So we've got s and z. Again, voicing makes the distinction possible. Now, you can think of fricatives in terms of, like, an analogy for the fricatives would be like when you're driving a car on the freeway and you've got your window cracked open like yay much. It's very loud, isn't it? Because the air is going through, you know, if you're driving 65, you hear this hissing sound like sss. So you want to close that window and then the sound stops. So that's fricatives are done like that. We have other words, other phenomena in the world that exemplify the sound created by friction as well. So moving backward in the oral cavity from the alveolar region to the post-alveolar region, you'll find two fricatives there as well. You'll find, this is like an elongated S, so if you take an S and pull it up and down, it becomes thinner and longer, so that's the elongated S, but the sound is sh, sh, like in she and shoe. And then we have which is exactly the same, but the voicing is the difference. So that sh, like in shoe, that's minus voice. And this sound, we often find it in medial positions in language, in words like measure, measure, and pleasure. That's the sound. Same place of articulation, also a fricative, but plus voice. Okay, and you can already see that we've got a pattern here. In these different places of articulation, you find two fricatives, one voiced and one voiceless, except when we go even further down to the glottis, where the glottis is used as the place of articulation for the sound. So this is a glottal fricative. He, hit, and so on. and it's voiceless because it's impossible to have that little opening between the glottis and at the same time vibrate the vocal cords. I mean, it can be done, but it is a voiceless sound. Okay, so we have covered the two major categories of manners of articulation now in different places of articulation. And then the next one, which is Affricates, is a combination of a stop and a fricative. English has only two Affricates, and those are the sounds ts and its voiced counterpart. You guessed, it will have a voiced counterpart, and that's the j, j. So these are post-alveolar ch and j. Look at your book so you can see those clearly there, and I'm going to put them here as well. Sounds, and they are also phonemes in English because we have minimal pairs like chill and the girl's name like Jill. Jill, Jill. Okay? Jill. So they are phones, but they are also phonemes, so we can symbolize them also between the slashes. If you look at a word like church and judge, how many voiceless Affricates do you find in the word church? Two, yes, one in the beginning, one at the end. But don't let the writing system kind of like get in the way, because what is the first sound in the musical instrument? Ch. It's the same as in church. Chill, church, cello. So we can find it sometimes not written by CH. So forget how we write things. That is not always helpful. That is also illustrated by the word judge. How many voiced post-alveolar Affricates do you find in the word judge? Two. One in the beginning, one at the end. Yes. Okay, and that's the Affricates. Now we have covered three categories of manners of articulation, which actually can be referred together as obstruents. Why do you think they can be referred to as obstruents? Yes?
They're blocked by something, or they're blocking something.
Yeah, because of what they do, or how those sounds are produced, the manner of articulation. The airflow is obstructed, so they're called obstruents because of the obstruction of the airflow. A complete obstruction for stops, a near obstruction for fricatives, and for Affricates, you start from a complete stop for the airflow, like for ch. You start like from a position of a t here, and then move quickly to the fricative position. You start from a complete stop and then open up a little bit so that the air can flow through. And for the for the voiced one, that's plus voice. For the j, we start like from a position of a d and then move quickly to the post-alveolar fricative position. So j. So we have ch and j. So this is sometimes called dual articulation, but it happens so rapidly that this is conceptualized as one sound. Okay, so obstruents, stops, fricatives, and affricates because of the obstruction for the air, and that's the manner of producing these sounds. Then we have nasals, liquids, and glides. The flap is kind of like an addition there. We'll talk about that in a moment. The remainder from here, down here, those are called sonorants. So sounds can be divided into obstruents and sonorants are all voiced. So with one exception, which we'll point out in a minute. These are all voiced, so we won't be making the distinction minus voice and plus voice for the remainder of the sounds because it's a moot distinction. Okay. So we've got three nasals in English. We've got the bilabial nasal. I'm coming back to the flaps in a moment. So we've got the bilabial nasal, we've got the alveolar nasal, and we've got a velar nasal, which we find at the ends of many words, and the ing suffix has that as well. So it is an N with like a curled tail, and it's called, that symbol is called an engma. So we've got and when you go home and can get rid of your masks, you can try that the air actually comes through the nostrils. Even though the mouth is open for and English has also two liquids, which are divided into the lateral liquid, and that's also alveolar. And then the retroflex liquid, which is indicated with an upside down R. And that's the American R. There are different kinds of R's in different R sounds in different languages, like the Spanish R sound is very different. The French and German R is not alveolar, those are uvular. So produced by, so that the uvula, that little hanging thing, is vibrating for the German and French R's, but the English R is an alveolar retroflex liquid that we curl the tongue a little bit towards the back or pull it back, retro and flex. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Okay, and then English has two glides, the W, like the W, and the Y, which is a palatal glide. Yeah, like in yes, yellow, you. And this is like in well and wow. You may have noticed the little W, a W with a little circle under it, because we have that still as a possible pronunciation. If you make the distinction between which and which, we mentioned this last time, which and which, then you have the w for. Okay, and I promised I'll add the flap there. It is an alveolar flap, and it's indicated with like an R kind of a thing. It's a sound between a D and an we characterize it that way, and it's typical of American English, like in the word like matter. What's the matter? What's the matter? Duh, duh, duh. So the tip of the tongue quickly flaps against the alveolar ridge. That's it for English consonants. Okay, do the exercises, as many of the exercises as you can. I will post. I will send you an email. I'll post the answers then later on. But try them out. Okay, have a good one.